Alright everybody, we're going to start lesson 10.2. This is the screencast on the Louisiana Purchase and the Lewis and Clark notes. So a quick recap on our previous lesson of 10.1. We talked about President Jefferson, we talked about the election of 1800 and how there was a major rift between the Federalists and the Democratic Republicans, and the Democratic Republicans ended up sweeping Congress and taking the White House. We also ended up with a tie in the Electoral College between two candidates from the same party, Jefferson and Aaron Burr. And that tie ended up going to the House of Representatives, and the Federalists controlled the House at that time, and they ended up choosing Jefferson after a 35-round voting process. And they finally broke the tie between Burr and Jefferson. So we fast forward a little bit, and we have the Supreme Court case of Marbury versus Madison, which the case in and of itself wasn't that important, but the precedent that was set by the Supreme Court and the Chief Justice John Marshall of the Supreme Court having the ability to declare actions of other branches of government unconstitutional. It sets up the precedent of judicial review. Very important concept, very important to know that that Supreme Court case leads to that precedent. So now we're on to the Louisiana Purchase. Now, we know that Jefferson was a small government guy, but he was also in favor of expanding. So another quick recap. We talk about New Orleans and the Mississippi River. So as more Americans end up moving west, they're going to end up depending more and more on the Mississippi River to ship their goods. It's going to be quicker for them to get the goods to the Mississippi than it will be to get it back to the East Coast or a river that leads to the East Coast. During Washington's presidency, the Spanish, who are in control of New Orleans and the Mississippi River, they agree, because of Pinckney's Treaty, they agree to allow us to use New Orleans and the Mississippi River freely. So that's a good thing. This kind of gives you an example of a couple of major rivers. So if people were over in the Ohio River area, that river feeds into the Mississippi. And so all of that territory that we owned or that our country possessed, it was quick access to the Mississippi using the Ohio River. So they wanted to be able to travel and send items down the Mississippi River, past New Orleans, and out the Gulf of Mexico. Okay, so New Orleans then, obviously it's a little bit of a rough drawing of New Orleans, and that bottom picture is what it looks like now. Much different than it used to be, but still very an important city. Alright, so New Orleans ends up changing hands. And this was a big deal. The reason for that is the Spanish, they were in control of New Orleans, and they had allowed us to use it. We just reviewed that briefly about Pinckney's Treaty. They allowed us to use the Mississippi River, and they allowed us to use New Orleans freely. New Orleans was important because as we moved west, the more we had access to easy transportation, the better our economies were, and the better that our people were going to be able to transfer goods and people from point A to point B. Spain, all of a sudden, during President Jefferson's presidency, cuts us off from New Orleans and the Mississippi River. Now, the reason for this is Spain is secretly negotiating the transfer of Louisiana to France. Napoleon was the military dictator of France, and there was a deal going on between the Spanish and the French. Okay, so if you look down there, the flag on the left is Spain, the flag on the right is France. Alright, so I want you guys to think about this a little bit, and you can pause the screencast while you do so. Why might the United States be concerned about the French gaining control of Louisiana territory and the Mississippi River in New Orleans? Think about who is in power in France. So we know that's Napoleon. What is he known for doing that might make President Jefferson and the American government a little bit nervous. I want you to write your answer on the slide where it says answer here. You can go ahead and pause this when you need to and resume it once you're ready. So, there's an important decision that is made. Thomas Jefferson, he decides that having New Orleans under French control is a little bit nerve-wracking. And he's going to send two men, Robert Livingston and James Monroe, to try and buy the port city of New Orleans. Remember, a port city is important for shipping goods from point A to point B. Deepwater ports are important. No pun intended. All right, so they were supposed to offer $2 million for New Orleans, but they were authorized to pay up to $10 million for this important city. So, these two, they go over to France, and they meet with Napoleon Bonaparte. Napoleon is a brilliant military commander. He is the military dictator of France. He is the top guy. For the most part, he was loved by his people. And like I said, he was a military genius. He got his start in artillery during the French Revolution, and he quickly rose in the ranks of the military to where he commanded his own forces. Eventually, he is going to use that force to take control of France. Now, Napoleon, he's the military dictator of France. He is a conqueror, or he was a conqueror. He had a dream of ruling all of Europe, and even more, he wanted a Western Empire. So that Western Empire means that it's outside of Europe, meaning North America and South America are to the west of Europe. So Napoleon, he saw Santo Domingo as a very strategic location for a naval base that he was going to be able to launch his military campaign from. So that was where he was going to start branching out and starting to take over territory and make it part of his empire. Santo Domingo, which is now Haiti, it's in the Caribbean, the ideas of the French Revolution had spread there. And so the people of Haiti, they revolted. They drive out the French. The French are not able to take control of that revolution and put it down. And so they are going to win their independence from France, and they become their own country. So the other half of that island of Haiti is going to be the other half of the island of Haiti is the Dominican Republic. And at the time that was under Spanish control. So France ends up losing and putting down that revolution. And Napoleon, he eventually decides to just give up on messing with Santo Domingo. And so France was at the height of its power during the Napoleonic Wars. If you look at this little map up at the top, you can see the purple areas are all of the territories that Napoleon controlled during 1812. He is going to make a major mistake of invading Russia in the fall, right as it's about to turn to winter, and Russia gets really cold. And so the Russians are going to use a scorched earth policy. They're going to slash and burn anything that the French could use, because a lot of times those armies did not take supplies. They just took whatever they needed as they went. And so that's going to lead to Napoleon's downfall. But Napoleon realizes that his dream of an empire in North America was not going to happen because of what happened in Haiti. So France, they need money for their wars in Europe. So they also want to make Britain angry. So they figure the best way to do that is to offer all of Louisiana to the United States. So at first we offer $4 million. Then Napoleon doesn't take that offer. He says that's way too low. So what I want you to think about, and I want you to answer down below here, is why might Britain be upset about the United States gaining the Louisiana Territory? You can go ahead and pause this and resume it once you are done answering the question. Okay, so the nation is going to double in size. So Livingston and Monroe debate about what to do. They end up buying all of Louisiana. They offer $15 million, and Napoleon takes it. So because of this, overnight our nation doubles in size, and we end up with the Louisiana Territory, which roughly ends up being about 3 cents per acre, which an acre is almost the size of a football field. So think about how many acres the Louisiana Territory is, and how cheaply we've been able to buy that land from France. Okay, so all or part of 15 different states. You can see that dark green center area in our country, in the map of our country. 15 states were eventually created from the Louisiana Territory. It's a pretty good sized chunk of land. So now, because of the Louisiana Purchase, some political issues start to grow. A lot of Federalists are pretty unhappy with the Louisiana Purchase. Many of them feared that this new territory is going to weaken the power of the northern states and add Democratic-Republican-leaning states to the Union. Some of them even began to organize a plan to secede from the Union. Now, to secede means to break away. They were going to form their own confederation or loose alliance of states. At the center of this plot was Aaron Burr, the vice president. Now, we had talked a little bit last lesson about the hatred that Hamilton and Burr have for one another. And so Hamilton pours salt into the wound. Not only did he cost Aaron Burr the presidency by negotiating behind the scenes to get somebody to vote against him, Hamilton accuses Aaron Burr of treason. So out of frustration with Hamilton and his constant attempts to harm his political career, Burr challenges Hamilton to a duel. In that duel, Burr shot Hamilton, and Hamilton dies approximately 30 hours later. His shot hit Hamilton in the abdomen area, so that's your stomach, fractured a rib, tore through his diaphragm and his liver, and it lodged into his spine. Burr ended up fleeing to avoid arrest, and his political career ends up going downhill from that point forward. He's even involved in an attempt to lead a force into Mexico, take some territory, and set up his own country in that area. He was found innocent of that, but nobody trusted him after that. So here's a statue of the Burr-Hamilton duel. Now, the Lewis and Clark expedition, pretty important. We have all this new territory. We have all this new territory that is under our control, and we need to know what's there. So Jefferson and Congress commissioned 2 men named Meriwether Lewis and William Clark to go explore this new territory. And Congress approves the funds for that. About 50 people in total go, and that includes several Native American guides. The most popular one is Sacagawea. So they set out, they were good friends, they lead this expedition westward. We have William Clark and Meriwether Lewis here in front of us. So the expedition instructions. Jefferson tells them to make careful observations, record everything that they've observed, and he especially wanted to know about weather, soil, and wildlife, and any minerals. Think about what valuable minerals might be there. Okay, so the explorers are also supposed to find out, what groups of Native Americans might be living there. They were supposed to try and make friends with them and set up some sort of a trade. Most importantly, they were told to look for the Northwest Passage, a waterway that goes from one side of the country to the other side of the country. They had been searching for that since the year 1500, and they didn't realize still that it does not exist. Okay, so the expedition begins in May of 1804. the Corps of Discovery leaves St. Louis and travels up the Mississippi. Excuse me.